I'm the... Okay, good. Hello, my name is Susan Hawthorne. Somebody needs to mute their system so that you don't interrupt the discussion. My name is Susan Hawthorne. I'm the publisher at Spinifex Press in Australia. I'm also the author of Bibliodiversity, a manifesto for independent publishing. In Australia, when we have events, we acknowledge the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples whose lands we live and work on, and I live and work on 𝘔𝘯𝘪𝘣𝘪 land in far north Queensland. The other thing that I want to do in starting this session is to talk about 𝘔𝘯𝘪𝘣𝘪𝘯𝘥𝘦𝘯𝘍𝑒𝑟𝑎 Fuentes, who was a member of the English language group. This is a photo of 𝘔𝘯𝘪 with her Bibliodiversity is Beautiful t-shirt. It really exemplifies her that she is promoting the message rather than herself. But before I met 𝘔𝘯𝘪, she contributed, along with her life partner, Linda Burke, to a Spinifex book called A Girl's Best Friend, The Meaning of Dogs in Women's Lives. And in the article, it was very clear that dogs were terribly important in her life. But it was not until 2016 that I finally met 𝘔𝘯𝘪 at her home near the Welsh border in the UK. We met because each of us was interested in what the other was doing. I wanted to meet 𝘔𝘯𝘪 because I was getting close to finishing my novel Dark Matters, and 𝘔𝘯𝘪's 2001 essay, Talking Within Pain, Reflections on Bodies Under Torture, that she and Linda had written about her horrifying experience of torture during the Pinochet regime in Chile. And it was pivotal to my thinking and to my research. I wanted to check that it was okay for me to draw on her experience in developing my novel. It was, thank goodness. 𝘔𝘯𝘪 wanted to meet me because she had come upon a copy of Bibliodiversity, a manifesto for independent publishing, and was writing an essay for her MA in publishing at the University of Derby about the concept of bibliodiversity. She told me she was planning to set up an independent publishing house in the following year, and she had some questions. 2 months later, I visited Chile and found part of the storyline of my novel. But prior to this, she had completed a postgraduate certificate in education in English at Concepcion University in Chile, an MA in Women's Studies at Lancaster University, UK, as well as a PhD also in Women's Studies, also at Lancaster. And she writes both fiction and poetry. And she was a very strong political activist. 𝘔𝘯𝘪 was totally committed to the idea of bibliodiversity, as you can see from her t-shirt. In some ways, that was not surprising, because the term Bibliodiversidad was invented by a group of Chilean publishers in the 1990s. Victorina Press, the press that 𝘔𝘯𝘪 established, opened in 2017, and since then has published 50 books, many of which have gone on to win prizes. So they cover fiction, poetry, and non-fiction. And of course, I'm talking about 𝘔𝘯𝘪 because she died just a few weeks ago. And although we all knew that this was coming, it was still a terrible shock. She had a fierce energy, and in addition to loving dogs, she also loved bright colours. I will remember her for her courage, her endurance, her imagination, and her friendship. So that the photograph of her is at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2018. The good news is that Victorina Press will continue with her son, 𝘔𝘢𝘯𝘪𝘧𝑦𝘥𝘪𝑑𝘦𝘳𝑴𝑟𝑒ℏ and his partner, Sophie Lloyd, acknowledge the importance of the work that 𝘔𝘯𝘥 has done to pay my respects to her. So thank you. Okay, so now I think I might have to say something about bibliodiversity. As I said in that brief acknowledgement of Consuelo, the word was invented by Chilean publishers. And in a way, that's not really terribly surprising, because biodiversity is a really important issue in many countries, and particularly in countries where there are biodiversity hotspots, as there are in Chile and as there are in Australia. But I had also been working for some years, it was actually my PhD, on a book called Wild Politics, Feminism, Globalization and Biodiversity, and that was published finally in 2002. So when I first heard the word bibliodiversity in 2007, I knew instantly what it meant, instantly. And I thought, yes, this is the word I've actually been waiting for. Isn't it interesting how you wait for words to come so that you can actually speak about the things that you want to know? So biodiversity is about having a complex, self-sustaining system in an ecological niche. And the important thing about biodiversity is that it is a system that is in dynamic balance. And so what I wanted to be able to explore was how bibliodiversity was also a system in dynamic balance, but instead of it being about ecology, it's about culture and the way in which the publishing industry works, and so forth. So that really was my initial rationale for writing the book. I wrote it very, very quickly. I had a residency in Italy at the time, so I actually had more time than usual. And I wrote about half of the book in about 3 days, and then I had to, of course, write the rest. And one of the other important things that I talk about in my book is the way in which the publishing industry, the very big publishers, tend to produce and reproduce books that follow a formula, whereas independent publishers like all of us who are in the Alliance, we tend instead to take more risks, to publish voices from the margins, to publish writers perhaps who've never been published before, or who are writing works that are really quite different. And that for me is very important. But also, as a feminist publisher, the other aspect of bibliodiversity is that feminism is central to the idea, because if feminism is not central to bibliodiversity, then half the world is being left out. So I think that's basically what I want to say as a starting point. And yeah, to hand over to have a broader discussion with others. Who's going to speak next? Samar, Barbara, you need to unmute yourself if you're going to speak.
Yes. Barbara, do you want to go ahead? No, me? Okay, no problem. So hello, everybody. And I just want to say one word to thank the Alliance team for preparing this beautiful platform for us to make these discussions available. And it's always sad to lose one of our own. I met Consuelo maybe one time in one book fair. Maybe this was the year when I met her in your stand, Susan, with sorry, I forgot her name. The one who is, yes, and it was like a quick encounter. We just spoke few words and then she left. And like I said, it's always sad to lose one of our own, and especially an activist and a serious publisher and passionate bibliodiversity person. So may her pure soul rest in peace, and all my condolences to her staff, family, and colleagues. So in terms of bibliodiversity, I think the concept in the Arab world, I will talk locally and regionally in the same time. Locally, it does not exist because people that do not understand the concept of it. Okay, we try and we try to elaborate and to explain. It's still ambiguous a little bit. And I just wanted to share a story about how I was introduced to bibliodiversity before I know the word, like Susan said. I used to work with my late father in his bookshop. It was in one of the main streets in the city of Damascus. And I used to see him receiving all those young authors who were distributing their books by themselves, like carrying a bag of books and like leaving 5 copies in each bookstore. And he never refused an author. Like he never said no to an author. He took everything in, everything, regardless of the genre, of the celebrity or whatever. I mean, young author, poetry, theater, whatever. He used to take 5 copies and put them in consignment against a small paper with the date, the price, the discount, and the quantity. And this is how it used to go. And it's not only this, he used to put them, he used to put them in display, sometimes in the window, because it's a new book, supposedly, you know. And when a customer, a walker by comes into the bookstore, he used to promote these new titles because there are new titles, you know. This was the main concern of them, like, okay, it's encouraging new authors, maybe encouraging the new genres, and all of a sudden we get introduced to the word bibliodiversity. So I said, oh, that's it. So this is bibliodiversity. I mean, we have to take everything in the bookstore, give them the chance to be displayed like bestsellers, like all big titles or celebrities. So I actually, this is the Arabic version of the book. I was reading it yesterday, and like I discovered that I just love the concept, and it means a lot to me personally. And reading it in Arabic also is very interesting, because there are, when it was translated, this was translated and published in the year 2016 by 5 publishers of the Arabic network of the Alliance. And the translator fell in love with the book, and he did a great job. And I want to say hello to Bilal if he's here, I don't know. But anyways, and I just discovered that this is like a timeless book about publishing industry and about us, small publishers. And it gives me hope every time I read it. Every time I discuss the concept, it's so it makes me always happy to read it. But the situation in our market, it's terrible in terms of bibliodiversity, and it's getting worse every book fair, every year by year. I mean, it's getting very worse, because we can see in the big book fairs that all the publishers are in the front, us in the back with small booths and like a few titles that mean passerby. They just stop and look at our titles and like continue without even asking about them, you know. So the situation, and it's not going in the right direction in our countries, in our market, I mean. And I don't see any hope for this to get better, because as I explained, it's hard to explain to the public. They're not interested. They're not interested about your lovely books, your small books, they're just not interested. They know they want the bestsellers, they know the known names, and they just want to go the easy path. They don't want to go do their homework. I'm not talking about readers only. I'm talking about distributors, booksellers, all the book industry, or the players of the book industry, I would say, even publishers, our big fellow publishers. I mean, they're not concerned about like a small, nice book that will last forever, maybe, and we can read it and read it and read it again and make our children read it, the new generation. They're not interested in books like this. So it's a dilemma. I don't know how to get out of it, but this is the situation in the Arab world. I can speak till the morning, but I think it's enough. And I'll let Barbara tell us about her country also.
Thank you for sharing this. Before the talk, I spoke with women from Alliance and with Susan, and I was saying that at the moment it's very turbulent time, and for me also a bit emotionally difficult. I'll tell you later, but I start with the way or how did I get to bibliodiversity concept. I was always very, very much involved in books. I didn't have my parents or the family as summer with in the business with selling books, but my mother was librarian. So all my life I was in the library and I really read everything. We even competed with my brother, who will read more books per day during holidays. So we really went crazy. And when because my background is mainly in documentary work and journalism, I started to write. Then by different coincidences in my life, I started also to publish book, and after several books I realized I'm also publisher. So it was not my plan, but it really happened. And in 2016 I was lucky that through my PhD studies I could go to Australia, to University of New South Wales, and there was this crazy situation because my first book I printed was pink, and when I entered the first day the library, because I always invade libraries when I'm somewhere because it's my familiar place, so I entered the university library. By chance I get off the lift in the third floor. There were only gray, blue, black books and only pink one, and it was Susan Hawthorne's Bibliodiversity cover. So I said, okay, I published my first book pink, so what is this pink book in the library doing? You know, this is very untypical color. So this is the way how I discovered Susan Hawthorne's book, by absolutely pure coincidence. And then I immediately read the book and I understood this is something what's very familiar what I do as a publisher. And then I immediately wrote to Susan, and we've met in Sydney through the Sydney Writers Festival, and etc., etc. A few months later the book was published in Czech language because I was so influenced. And I have to say, what really changed this book in my life is the fact that I became aware of how we as publishers are or should be responsible, or through our activities we can be responsible what's happening in the public space or in the society, and that we are responsible for the subjects and languages in books, that we can really change the world into something better if we do really a nice curatorial work, or choose the proper writer and share important ideas in the world. But also for me, I became more aware about other aspects of bibliodiversity, such as I don't know, like ecology or ethical behaving, you know, or I was able to finally see all the book ecosystem, that it's not only publisher or the bookseller, but that there are libraries involved there. The readers has got also responsibility how they behave, and that we need to educate them, etc., etc. And just these days they were very, very turbulent, because we were preparing with the institution, the Gallery of Municipal House in Prague, the festival, the art book festival, and they invited me to be the dramaturgist of the program about ecology and ethics. And I was super happy that we could invite, for example, 𝘉𝘪𝑣𝘭𝘪𝘰, who was talking about ecology within the north and south, you know, and it was amazing. 2 days of amazing talks and everything. And I really invited all people from different fields. So there were people from libraries, there were publishers, there were people who are creating ecological paper, etc., etc. And the last discussion was with the Ministry of with people from the Ministry of Culture, and it was like you've got the snap on your face suddenly, you know, that there are so many people involved who want to do something, change something, and then the reality is so tough that it's really something that put you in a huge depression then, you know, that so many people agree on something, and then the answer of the Ministry of Culture is through their people that it's not big subject to deal with this and this and this. So we realized there is a really huge work to do, and I put the notes, you know, to compare what is good and what is not good. So, for example, what is super good is that people are already knowing the word bibliodiversity. We were very lucky on introducing this subject in Czech context. So whoever hears this word, so everybody knows what this word means. For me, it's a super good thing, because we don't need to introduce everything again. We were very lucky with many medias who really at first helped us to introduce this subject. Like because of this festival, I've been now in several medias, and all the journalists knows what is the subject. I had the space to talk about it, so I was very grateful for this. Amazing thing is that we had one talk with the libraries, and through years we could talk with them about this subject. And for example, now several libraries are already using this principle to purchase books, for example. So they directly go to the small publishers buying the books. So this is a huge change. Amazing thing is also I was working, for example, the other day with the National Gallery on the project for the Biennale in Venice, and I could also again use the subject of bibliodiversity to discuss different things with architects, you know. So I could really see that this subject is really, or this topic is really applicable within the different fields. It's not just about books, but also about the culture itself, you know, and about art, but also other intellectual professions, for example. So I was very hateful to go through it. And for example, many small, because I was talking about libraries, but also I'm now in touch with many small bookstores, as it's quite easy in Czech Republic to change the system of distribution now, that we don't need to be dependent on big distribution networks. We can really be in touch with small independent bookstores. So for example, I'm cooperating with around 40-50 small bookstores that really all of them, they know what bibliodiversity means, and they are collaborating with us small publishers. So it's really changing. Or like few years ago, we had the new director of the biggest book fair, Svět knihy in Prague, and every year he's offering us more and more and more space there. So this year was for us very unique. We even had the space to discuss bibliodiversity, and there is like 50,000 people coming, so it's not small thing, you know. So we are having really more and more space to discuss this subject, and this subject is important, and I'm happy that many members of this book environment or ecology system or ecosystem knows already, like many members know already about this thing and are very helpful. But on the other hand, for example, I really now encounter a huge campaign against this too. For example, in media, because I always talk about bibliodiversity also in the concept of ecology and responsibility, and that it's not important to grow and to purchase everything, that we should, for example, more collaborate with libraries to offer the libraries the books, or they purchase the books, so it's really affordable for everybody. That I really believe that the libraries are the important tool for sharing bibliodiversity. And like few last days, it's such a huge campaign, hate campaign against me and the subject. The journalist really put terrible title on one of my interviews for the media, and it was something I never said, and this is the most crazy thing. And the title says something, it's nonsense to buy new books. I would never say anything like this, especially as a publisher. And suddenly people are not reading or listening to this podcast or reading this interview. And suddenly I'm becoming the target of different like right-wing groups, or the people who are accusing me of being, I don't know. So it's really crazy, because it's really taking off the subject that is important, that is bibliodiversity, and suddenly the media is not helping to share it. And I'm really thinking about it as a kind of passive aggressivity against this subject, because suddenly I'm talking about not being consumerist all the time, thinking about the quality more than the quantity, and suddenly it doesn't fit with the contemporary economical society, you know. So it's very difficult. It's another side of bibliodiversity for me now in Czech Republic, because this is something I could expect, because I know there are always people who are trying to convince you that what you're saying you don't understand, and etc. But this was really too much. I'm avoiding those all conversations. I'm really not reading it, but of course other people are telling you this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And the good thing is that there are also journalists who are like then standing and fighting for this concept, that it's not only me, or so it's easier to bear this, you know. But it's crazy, because really this bibliodiversity idea is linked to so many things, to economy, ecology, to human rights, and it's super important really to fight and to share the ideas. And there is another point I really found, that, for example, very often when I go to some discussion and I talk about this subject, or my colleagues, we are personally attacked. For example, when we say we behave like this and we believe in this and this and this, they personally attacks you. So when you're talking about the ecology, but you fly, you are using airplanes, you know, or you have this at home, you know, or you've got too many books, so suddenly they are attacking your personal choices. And it's very, very difficult to be able to skip it and to continue fight for something you believe in. Sorry for my long talk, but I'm full of emotion these days.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why I suggested this session is because I was so thrilled to have my book translated into so many languages, and here are just some of them that are here. And I didn't expect any translations, and then suddenly it was in Arabic and French, and came out in German and Spanish and Czech, and it's due to come out in Portuguese at some point. So and so that was extraordinary. But and so it was also that I received, just as you and Samar now have expressed, a lot of emotion and a lot of enthusiasm, and I think it's a really important concept because publishing is a social activity, it's cultural, it's political, but I think the most important thing about publishing is that it can be transformative, and it's that transformative expression that is so important, I think, for independent publishers. And I mean, what we're up against is really, I mean, it's huge. We're up against this huge structure called neoliberalism, you know, and globalization and capitalism that's gone completely crazy. And I on one occasion at a conference in Sydney, I suggested that bookshops should put the books that have been published by independent publishers and perhaps some poetry books at the front of the store and the bestsellers at the back, so that, because you know the people are going to go to the back of the store and get the bestsellers, but if all the independents and the poets are at the back of the store, they might never make it there. But I got into trouble for suggesting that from a bookseller who thought this was the most terrible idea that had ever been put forward. And as you said, we're up against monocultures. You know, 𝘉𝘪𝘱𝘦𝘯𝘪𝘵 calls it the monocultures of the mind. She has a fabulous book called that. And the monocultures that we're dealing with are very like the agricultural monocultures, which just put one, you know, agricultural kind of farm in an area, so you get wheat that goes for hundreds of miles. I grew up on a wheat farm, so you know I know about wheat, but also the forests that are planted with trees that come in from outside of the country. So you know you often find plantation forests contain trees that come from somewhere else, because they're the ones that they want to chop down. And you know we're up against this, and then there's also the issue of languages, and in colonized countries like Australia, and you know we have the problem of the colonization of Indigenous people in Australia, the decimation of their languages. There used to be something like 600 Indigenous languages in Australia. That's now down to about 250, but some of those languages are down to their last few speakers. And so the difficulty of trying to ensure that those languages actually persist and that the next generation has some way of learning them and then passing them on is terribly important. And this is a problem in, you know, lots of countries that have been colonized. You know, the colonized world is full of these problems. And then there's the digital side. Now, I got into ebooks quite quickly, but I can also see that there's a, you know, I'm a bit conflicted about it, because it's a good system to be able to get books to people in remote and rural areas because they're 300 kilometers from a bookshop. But it also has problems of being, you know, recolonized through the digital area. And I did see when not very long after we set up Spinifex Press, that was 1991, I was attending conferences in the US book fairs and things like that. And at that time, there was something like 150 feminist bookstores in North America. So across Canada and the US, there was a huge number of feminist bookstores. And then a mix of things happened. The superstores came in, and the superstores, what they did, places like Barnes and Noble, they would set up just across the street or around the corner or even next door to the feminist bookstore, because the feminist bookstores were the very good independents. So what they needed to do is they needed to get them out of the way. And then Amazon came, and that also had a problem. And the superstores would order large quantities of feminist books from the feminist publishers. And then the feminist publishers thought they were doing really well. They would reprint, and then just after they've reprinted, suddenly there's a whole lot of returns coming back from the superstores who over ordered, and it became one problem stacked on top of another. So the feminist bookstores died. There are hardly any feminist publishing houses in America, in the US, hardly any in Canada either, and that was a problem. And then Amazon came, and Amazon, actually there was an Amazon bookstore in the US, and so they eventually got a payout from Amazon, which did not represent any value to them really, but they had stolen that name from the bookstore because they were selling books. And there were all these things, and then the whole digitization, the use of the internet coming in, the phones, the proliferation of devices and so forth. That's had a terrible effect on feminist bookstores. So the range of different kinds of bookstores that exist now much it's not as many, and there are not as many independent bookstores. So and publishing is a really complex industry. I mean, we have the writers. The work starts with the writers, and then we have the publishers, and then there are the publishers like us, and then there are the publishers like in the English language. There are 6 big publishers who own most of the industry. 6. And then there are thousands of tiny ones and a few middling-sized ones. Then there are the bookshops. There are, again, bookshops that are huge, many chains. Then there are the small independents. And they're all very different. And then there are the libraries, as you were saying, which are really, libraries are being attacked, I think, because it's a public good. So let's pull out the public good and privatize them. Then there are distributors. It's very hard to get a distributor often if you're a small press. And translators. Translators have a very hard time, even when a book is translated into, say, out of Czech or Arabic into English. Getting that book into an English language bookshop is very difficult, unless they're a small independent that specializes in literary and translated literature. And finally, we have the readers, and the readers are being shortchanged because they're not actually getting the range of books that are available. And in my view, often they're not getting the most interesting books. I mean, not to say there aren't some fabulous books published by big publishers as well, but that often comes later. So I think bibliodiversity is such an important concept, such an important thing for us as small and independent publishers in many different countries to be able to come around. I don't think that in Australia very many people know the word bibliodiversity, so congratulations to you for having journalists who understand the word, because I'm not sure that in Australia they do. They understand the word diversity, but that's different. And I think it's getting harder and harder and harder for all of us to get the work out, to get it acknowledged, and for it to be taken seriously. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of things. So what else can we talk about? Samar?
Yes, I agree with your citing of all the players in the publishing industry, but I noticed one thing. I don't know if it exists in Australia or Czech Republic. Our distributor, as soon as you find a nice, honest, sorry to say this, but I mean most of them are like whatever, and that would appreciate nice books published by independent publishers. Like you give him the books to distribute. I'm talking about another country, not in Syria specifically. In Syria, there are no distributors. We distribute our books ourselves. But I mean, as soon as you find someone like this, like 2-3 years, he wants to turn into a publisher all of a sudden. I mean, you just like ask him why you are publishing your own books. And when he is a publisher, of course, he would put his books in the front and put my books in the back, not only my books and other colleagues, small publishers. So this is a big problem in the Arab world. I mean, it's been happening for like at least 10 years now in Egypt, in Iraq, in the Gulf even. I mean, we're talking, the Gulf is our big market. Regardless of the censorship, we can have some detours sometimes about the censorship. But I mean, in the Gulf regions and countries, many distributors and very good, powerful distributors who would take independent publishers' publications turn into publishers. And this is a big problem. You find yourself, like you find the book there for like a year, and then you receive a huge return that you have like thought you've sold, but no, now you're stuck with the return, with the storage spaces. And so I don't know if this exists in your country. On a different note about translators, we have translators with us now, Randa, and I think they could play a big role in elevating the concept of bibliodiversity, because sometimes translators propose books to be translated to small publishers. Among their readings, they find a nice title that is not bestseller or commercial content, and they propose this to us. So translators also can play this vital role in elevating this concept, in my opinion, some translators. And what else to say? So, I mean, like you said, there are lots of things to speak about, but I mean, maybe it needs the whole day. So I'll leave it to Barbara.
One other thing I'm thinking about you talking in that way is another method of well, censorship in a way is the silent treatment. And in Australia, one of the things that has happened, and I think this is probably true in a lot of English language countries, is that the review space in newspapers has almost disappeared. I used to be a regular reviewer in metropolitan newspapers, and you would write a review of, say, 800 words, maybe 1,000 words, and so it would take up, you know, a third of the page or something like that. And these days, you know, a third of the page is cut into 8, and so you have maybe 100 words for a review, which makes it very, very difficult. But also the other thing is that if the media decides that they no longer like you, then your books just don't get reviewed, and that's a real problem too. I mean, really, I don't recall having any reviews of bibliodiversity in the Australian media media, although there were publishers who talked about it, and I gave a number of talks, but it was very, very difficult to actually get people to engage with the idea. And just as it's difficult, you know, these days to get people to engage with the idea of climate change, although I must say having big fires, big floods, big cyclones does tend to concentrate the mind a little. And, you know, we're getting a lot of that here in Australia, a lot of concentrating of the mind, but it's also happening, I see, across the Northern Hemisphere as well. And that is dreadful. So I think, yeah, Barbara, yeah, I think you've got something more to say.
It's so inspiring. I'm constantly putting so many notes on my paper while you are talking. And I was just now thinking, based on your talk, it's about this ecosystem in Czech Republic, what is happening, and it's the practices that arrive also from other countries, what's happening there too. It's that we've got 3 big distributors in Czech Republic and several smaller ones, and most of them, they don't have only publishing houses now, they also own shops. So suddenly we are so endangered. And what happened during COVID 3 years ago, one of the biggest, when we had very strict rules, so they really locked the shops for hundreds of days in Czech Republic. And what happened, that the big distributors said, we won't pay anyone, we keep all the money for ourselves to protect ourselves. So it meant, and because it happened in March, the shops were closed in March, and they still, because they pay, you have to wait as a publisher in some for the salary from some distribution networks for more than 90 days. It meant that they kept the money from Christmas market. So it endangered all the market, and there was a huge protest, and suddenly we could, but because of this, we could really talk aloud in medias. We got such an attention as independent voices, because we said, if they do this, we all collapse, you know. Even if I'm not using this distribution network, my small distribution was offering them my books. So they didn't have the money to pay me too. So we all almost collapsed. So since that, I was really thinking how to protect myself more and really be as much as possible independent. And I know it's not possible in all countries. It's the advantage of Czech Republic. We've got only 10 million inhabitants. If you sit in the train in 5 hours, you are everywhere, you know. You can cross the country in 4 or 5 hours. So I really started to think a bit differently, and I'm applying the rule of chair with more legs. It also means that my books are not only I give to the distributor, not own. So imagine the chair, and the more legs the chair has, the more protected we are. So I'm trying really to sell the books by myself through the e-shop. I go to book markets, to different places. Then I'm going to the small shops. So I'm really in touch with around 40-50 small shops directly. I'm in touch with several libraries who are buying the books by themselves. I'm linked to the readers and people who are supporting me. So I'm using very often the crowdfunding campaign. So it's also the kind of one of the legs, and I'm using also the distribution. But to avoid, for example, their power, I'm giving the books only to their shops. So I'm forbidding them to distribute me, because then I can deal with them with fixed price, so they don't give discounts, they don't use different providers. They really treat my book differently, and it's, of course, it's much more work. It's really, almost every day I'm packing book by myself for 1 hour, 2 hours sometimes. I already bought the big bag on trolleys, you know, to deliver it to the delivery system. but it's the way how to protect myself. Because, for example, all the big distributors really purchased many shops, they really invested a lot, so suddenly they don't have money to pay us. And it's a big problem, because suddenly the publishing houses that are linked to this distributor are having tough time too, and shops too, you know. So suddenly the money are spent, they are selling our books, but they are not paying us. So I really created this much safer environment. And of course, when you publish the books that are not in 10,000 or 50,000 copies, the price is much different from the price when you really do this small print run. And for example, within the discussion a few days ago with the Ministry of Culture, I was really telling them, we are really trying to do our best. You know, we are doing this, we are talking with libraries, we do this. So it would be super nice from you, as the authorities, the Ministry of Cultures, could create a very small campaign just to support the independent art, you know. And they say, no, it's your responsibility, you have to work more. But I already work almost 24 hours per day, you know, because being a small publisher means that I'm really alone, or some publishers are 2, maybe 3, you know, they can share a bit. But I really remember the last talk from Pamplona when Vandana Shiva said this thing about being small is good, you know. And I really think the strategy to survive all these purchases of big distributors, etc., it's really being small and sustainable, you know, also in terms of surviving all this, what's happening. It's very tough. Sometimes I really think I'm at the moment, I'm a bit slowing down even more than I'm slow already, you know, but I'm even slowing down, because sometimes it's really frustrating what we are going through. But I think it's important thing. And I wanted also to react to Susan, and I've got a question to Summer and Susan too. How many books are being published per year in your country? Because I think it's very linked to the medias and the possibility to enter media. Because I'm quite lucky, because I've got also journalist training, so I'm quite easily in medias, and we've got attention with the books, because we really try to work on some social issues, etc., etc. So we are offering medias important subjects, but you too. But maybe it's just because there is such a huge overproduction of other books that it's very difficult to enter it. I'll just give a comparison. In Czech Republic, we are 10 million inhabitants, plus we sometimes count even 5 million people living in Slovakia, because we are able to speak and read fluently in both countries. So the market is maybe around 15 million people. And but in Czech Republic only, I don't know the number from Slovakia, but Czech Republic, it's between 15 to 17,000 books every year being published. So this is my comment, and maybe if you can react to it.
Are you talking about titles per year? This is your question? How many titles
yeah. How
in
many
general?
In general, how many titles is being published?
Well, as everybody knows, Syria is it's not healthy. It's a pirate country torn by 12 years of war. And the industry is literally almost dying. I mean, we are suffering on a daily basis to just like survive. Unfortunately, we don't have any statistics to get these numbers, but I could speak about small or medium-sized publishers like myself. Well, it depends. Sometimes we're between 5 and 10 per year, not more than this. Medium size, I would consider myself medium, but like there are small publishers who publish like 3 or 4 titles per year. And we don't have to forget something very important, that many publishers left the country and they're not any longer registered are publishers. at the Ministry of Information, because I think last time I checked, the number got down from 2,000 publishers with licensed publishers to 5,000 to 500, sorry. So you can imagine how many publishers we lost, and they were like all sizes, different sizes, big, small, and medium. And of course, we lost our readers. We lost. I mean, the country is in a very, very, very bad shape, and you cannot have Syria as an example. You know, just like you can't. And our market is bigger than Syria only, because if it was only Syria, I would have like closed many years ago. We count on the outside market, which is the Gulf, and the countries around us are suffering also, like Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Palestine. So we count now on the Gulf, and the Gulf is like very, very aggressive in terms of censorship and bibliodiversity. They don't like small books, and their book fairs are like terrible, terrible. You cannot send anything you want. They censor the books before they get them to your booth. They censor them in the store when they receive the shipment from the country. So it's very complicated. All this is obstacles in front of bibliodiversity in our market, I think. But to answer your question, I'm sorry, I cannot give you numbers. I'm so sorry.
I also can't give numbers. I can tell you that there are approximately a few more than 100 publishers who are members of the Australian Publishers Association. 6 of those are big publishers. Then there is another group, maybe 10 or so, who are, you know, very big, you know, something like Allen and Unwin, who distributed J.K. Rowling for a number of years, and that got them even bigger, and the university that are independent and small presses. In terms of numbers of books, I have no idea. We do about 10 books in a year, so occasionally a couple more, occasionally a couple less. But the biggest problem in Australia is that we have books dumped on us from the US and from the UK. So in addition to, and they're the ones that get all the publicity because they've already had publicity in the media in the US and in the UK. So trying to get into the media against all of those is very, very difficult. So, you know, we probably have, I don't know, let's guess that 100,000 books are published in Australia a year. That's a wild guess, but probably 1 million come into the country from somewhere else, from another English language market that is much bigger than us. So I think, you know, it is I wish a David against Goliath.
Before we finish, because sorry, it's time. Maybe we can see if there is
I think
a question.
I can see we're coming to the end. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe there is there are question from the audience. Feel free to.
Hi.
Yes. Hi.
So I'm Swazik. I'm a French librarian. So I just wanted to say how happy I was to hear so much about libraries this morning. So thank you, especially Barbara. So as a librarian, I just wrote an essay last year about the importance of libraries in the bibliodiversity. So that's something I really care about, and a lot of librarians do. So yeah, and as a matter of fact, I'm participating this Friday to an independent comics publishing festival in Paris, which is called 𝘉𝘪𝘣𝘭𝘪𝘵, and the festival opens with a conference on Friday about, so it's called Bibliodiversity is a combat sport. So just to make you
That's nice.
know about it.
That's
So,
nice. Yeah.
This
Thank you
is
very
the French.
much.
This is the French edition of the Bibliodiversity.
Yeah, I know it. I've read it, of course. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Other questions?
Hi, I have a question. Thank you to all of you for your very interesting comments on bibliodiversity and what it is to actually implement it and live it on a day-to-day basis. I was wondering if you could comment on the extent to which you have sort of support networks, because I guess to implement those actions, because Barbara, you mentioned some of the actions that you were taking to remain independent to the extent possible, but obviously that moves you towards a more precarious situation. And yeah, I guess as a bookseller, we're also trying to think about bibliodiversity. And Susan, you mentioned we're the Davids of the world against the Goliaths. And so to me, it seems obvious that we need to think about, network and, building ties and I guess, I don't know, support webs. I was wondering if you could comment on the reality of that, of what you've experienced so far.
Well, one of the things that we've done talking about distribution is that we now distribute ourselves in Australia. It was just not worth it. We lose so much of the part of the book, 65% or thereabouts, to the distributor, and we can give 50% discounts to our readers and still earn more. And so, I mean, that's not something we do very often, but occasionally we have a sale and we can do that. But and in Australia, I mean, nearly all of our sales now go through us, whether that's to bookshops or directly over our website. And we actually sell more directly than we can even in the US and the UK. And actually those sales are pretty good. So that has actually helped us survive. Although when we first started doing it, we thought this was a bit of a desperate move, but it turns out not to be. And same with COVID. COVID has helped us in some ways, because now we do Zoom launches and we can have launches that go all around the world. And we're printing PODs, which saves us on freight. So the freight, we don't have to deal with freight now. We do have to print in the US, but we only pay as we go, instead of risking a whole lot of money on larger print runs, which is what we used to do. So there are different ways of surviving, and I mean, I think everybody comes up with their own. I think you having the ear of the Ministry of Culture is a really important thing. We don't have anybody's ear. And Samar, you have the Gulf countries. We have the US and the UK, which, certainly we wouldn't survive without them. And we do have our support networks. We have networks of feminists in different countries who support us, and that's really important.
Maybe I'll also add two little comments, because I think it's very important really to understand that every publisher in every country's got so different experience and possibilities, that what's working for me in Czech Republic is not working maybe nowhere else. That is very specific. But what we were thinking with, for example, my colleagues who created the alternative distribution system in Czech Republic, so I really think it may work something that will be collaborative, that we create some alternative systems. So this platform that is called Amanak in Czech Republic, it links the publishers with libraries and with bookstores directly. So it's very easy system to go through, that you can order. It helps you to sort out invoices, etc., etc. But it's the beginning of the system. So you need for example, people who would help to understand the system, etc., etc. At the moment, Anna with Veronica, who are creating the system, they were so tired that they just stopped it for a moment, because it needs time. And when you were asking about this precarious work, it's the reality. It's terrible. It's the reality, and it brings me to another my comment. It's the price of the book and the value of culture. And I really think we need to push, for example, on the government, on the Ministry of Culture, and talk about the importance of culture and support to the culture, because culture is something that helps the democratic systems to survive, that really can do something. And I really think without the support of, I don't know, the state or other subjects that are, for example, I don't know, I give you another example. For example, with journalists, there is a private fund in Czech Republic, but nobody knows where are the money coming from. And there is a ethical committee that is redistributing money to journalists so they can do the investigative work. And it's protected that the money are not influencing the content, and they help them to work, you know. So if there were kind of this collaborative, supportive systems, etc., that help us, that we do not work really precariously, but we are paid for our work, or the authors are paid, etc., to enable us to work not constantly with frustration, etc. It would be amazing. So for me, the answer on your question is really to work on creating alternative systems within the this ecosystem of books. And the other thing is to talk about the importance of culture, and that we need the support to do the culture, because culture is not business. When the culture turns into business, we all know the consequences. So this is what comes to my mind.
Thank you.
Yep.
I don't know, shall I answer? I think I answered my question in my previous note, but I would say no, we don't have support networks in our country, not from the state, not from the civil society, none. And I just want to point for something very important. I don't know if you have it. We have two prices for our books, local and the outside. The outside is in the US dollars, because we have to do this. And the local currency is always, the price is very, very, very low. I mean, sometimes we're not making any profit selling inside, but I'm taking this choice because I'm a Syrian publisher, and my priority is the Syrian readers, who's left from them actually. And we have a few loyal customers who would still come to our headquarters and buy books from us directly. We give them small discount. And like I said, we have 2-3 bookshops in Damascus, that's all. And we distribute very, very few. We have some in other Syrian cities. So our sales inside Syria are like close to zero. So our income, our main income, is from the outside book fairs and outside distributors. But no, we don't have any kind of support from anywhere, unfortunately.
We do occasionally get a little bit of support, but you know, it happens maybe once every 5 years, which is not enough to run a cash flow with.
Absolutely, it's occasional, but I mean, when it happens. But now you don't have to forget the sanctions against Syria. We can't have any support from anywhere, and so Syria is a very specific case. It's not, you cannot compare. It has its specificity, unfortunately.
Sudan, it's time. Do you want
to finish?
a few words to conclude? Yeah.
Well, look, I would just like to thank everybody, all of you who are here listening, but particularly to Barbara and Samar and everybody at the Alliance for putting together this amazing program, and for all of the work. You know, I've done lots of organising, and I know there's an awful lot of work that you never see when you're participating in an event. There's a behind the scenes thing that happens. So thank you for all the behind the scenes work to make these events happen over these coming days. So thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody,
Thank you.
for
It's really
Thank you
assisting.
too.